I'm building a giant tank in Minecraft. I'd clarify that before I get put on a government list. One of my first projects when I was learning how to make slime block flying machines was a working tank in Minecraft. And I just remember it being a really fun project to work on, so I thought I'd come back over 5 years later and see how much I've improved. And as you can see, I've already done a little bit of experimenting and I've confirmed that the size of my tank tracks is possible. So now I have to just build them. This is going to be a very long few days. You see, the thing with Minecraft tank tracks is they're a little bit of a mathematical mind boggler. You see, the bottom of the tank track has to look like it's on the ground, so the bottom of the tank track can't move with the flying machine. The flying machine moves one block at a time, and for the tank tracks to look like they're moving, the top of the tank track needs to move forward 2 blocks when the rest of the flying machine is only moving forward 1 block. So there's a lot of different speeds going on there. On top of this, I didn't want too many straight lines and I didn't want any harsh diagonals. I kind of wanted to round things off, and that made things exponentially more complicated and added so much more complexity. But eventually, I got the top section done. That was kind of the tricky part. And then there was the bits on the sides, which just provided such a headache because I didn't know how many blocks they needed to move. Did they need to move 2 blocks, or did they need to move just with the flying machine, or I mean, what's going on there? Finally, I kicked my brain into gear and worked out that it needs to go 1 block across and 1 block down, and that got it all fixed up. And now I have myself a gigantic working tank track, which looks absolutely ridiculously cool. The last thing that I wanted to add was a little bit of decoration in the middle, which just finishes off the entire thing. It makes the whole thing look like an actual build, and I'm really happy with it. It is now the next morning, and I've discovered something. While I was looking for my own tank video to see how I did the top section, I saw this ridiculous tank designed by mythical PINGU. I mean, just look at this thing. It's ridiculous! Now, I'm very familiar with PINGU's work. In fact, he actually designed all of Doc M's robots for the Hermitcraft bot battle, so some would say I'm too familiar with his work. But I hadn't seen this tank before, and I love the idea of the quad tracks. So I'm going to take big inspiration from that, and I'm going to do quad tracks myself. This tank is getting twice as big. A few hours of me learning Litematica later, this is quite possibly one of the coolest things I've ever seen. Also, hilariously, while I was in the process of copying this tank track, a wandering villager spawned, so now I just have a bunch of them dotted around. So now I need to start building the body of this thing. I mean, where do I even begin? I'm thinking I do the motor first. If I actually get this thing moving, then that's a really good place to start building all of the decoration on top of it. So this line of blocks here, if I move this forward, that will move the entire first 2 tracks forward. These 2 are now paired together. And I was going to add something into the system that runs back to this track here, but I actually think I could probably pull this track forward using the flying machines connected to this track. So it's like a big chain reaction that travels through the tracks down to the end. That seems like a pretty good idea that should work quite nicely. So from there, all I need to do is create a flying machine that essentially pushes this. All of this extra stuff, this is all dealt with, this is all done. All I've got to do is create something that consistently pushes this line of blocks forwards. If you ever wonder how I build large slime block flying machines, or large machines in general, or just large projects in general, it's by breaking it up into smaller chunks. Massive things are just a bunch of smaller things, and if you focus on completing the small things, then eventually you end up making the massive thing by accident. And it's funny, this circuit right here is probably one of the smallest circuits I'm going to build today, but it's the most important because this is actually the motor. This is the thing that's pushing the entire system forwards. And hopefully I've made it slow enough so that it doesn't just leave half the build behind. This observer here is the activator. Despite having many backups, I'm nervous. All I have to do is place in this button, and everything should start moving. So you can see our tank tracks are all working, and I think this is moving at an okay pace. Nothing seems to be breaking. This looks ridiculously cool. So that was very successful. Things don't often work first time, so I'm very happy about that. Now I need to build up the body of the tank, which I'm still not 100% certain how I'm going to do. It's just going to involve a lot of diagonal lines. Tanks are very diagonal. I think I'm also going to use copper as well, because copper, it's just the coolest looking block. I know tanks don't normally look like this. They kind of look like this, and that's close enough for me. Now, the way that you build up walls and things like that on slime block flying machines is by essentially creating tiles. So this tile will move forward, then this one, then this one. And if you chain enough of them together and then put blocks on the outside, it starts to look like an actual structure. Oh yeah, as you can see, I've switched over to using slightly weathered copper because it looks kind of like camouflage, and I think that works. I'm also adding a few extra tiles down at the bottom just to fill in this air gap here, and that is a really solid start for the base of our tank. Now I have to actually check if it moves. It didn't, but with some small adjustments to the front section, it still doesn't. How am I so incapable of counting? Right, after even more adjustments to the front, now at least the system is working, but this has disconnected because I forgot to place in an observer. In fact, I didn't forget to place in observers. I put them on the wrong side of the pistons. That is such an embarrassing mistake to make. PINGU would never make a mistake like that. But now, after many headaches, it is actually working and it is actually moving forward. Very exciting. So now I just have to mirror it on the other side. Look how long my world name is already. Not only have I added in the other side, I've also added in this extra front section, which I think rounds everything off and just looks great. Although it kind of looks a bit like a face. It almost looks like my face in a very weird way. I wonder if I can lean into this. Is there a way that I can lean into it? Like if I was to go something like this, I mean, that kind of works. I guess I just need to fill in the block in the middle and then maybe switch these over to being black as well. That is really funny. So the bottom is done and now working. Now I just need to build the top. So I need to cover over all of this stuff and then build up the turret section. So I'm building this up in tiles once again, and I kind of want to have little peaks of the redstone underneath. I think that looks cool. I don't want this to be a solid area of blocks. I still want little ideas of the redstone contraption underneath. And I would say this strikes the right balance. We can still see a lot of the circuitry, but equally there's enough covered that you get the idea that this is a solid build. I've employed the use of another technique here. This is not using tiles. I'm now pushing from the back, and that allows me to push regular pistons forward. These aren't attached to slime blocks or anything like that, and that means that I can make use of the full push limit of 12 blocks. Obviously, I work my way up to the maximum of the 12 block push limit in these tiles as well, but they're considerably smaller because, of course, it's 3 blocks, 3 blocks, 3 blocks, and then all of the extras, it adds up to 12 very quickly. Whereas with lines of blocks, 12 blocks looks like quite a lot. I have no clue if that made sense. Hopefully it did. Now it's turret time, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. Really not sure how I'm going to do this. I'm almost tempted to build something that kind of loops back and then pushes it from behind. A little bit like what we've got going on here. Now that I've been playing with it, I think I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to try my best to keep pulling it in this direction. I think this could work. I don't know. You can tell when I'm confused because I'll just repeat the same word twice every single time I say it. But bafflingly, this does actually seem to be working. So in theory now, I should just be able to extend this backwards and we'll have ourselves a wall of a tank. I placed that slime block in completely the wrong location. I have to really be careful because if I hit one of these observers, it could cause a horrible chain reaction. Anyway, now I'm back to just tile placing for the time being, which has led to a very cool looking structure, but it did look a little bit flat. So I think I'm going to add some extra details along the side here. I can already tell this is going to look totally pants. So instead, I think I'm going to just add a stripe in the color or multiple stripes in the color. That looks a million times better. This is starting to look super menacing now, especially now that there's a second side. It is a tiny bit thin. I think I made it probably about 2 blocks too skinny, but I've knocked a few blocks off the top, and I think that's really helped. So now we build the cannon, which is a little bit of a weird one. I've started placing in some blocks here just to work things out, and I think this will work. I'm trying my best to make it as solid as possible, but when you're pushing from the back, you have to have air gaps because obviously those pistons need to go to that space so that they can push forward. The reason I generally prefer pulling parts of redstone contraptions is they can all stick together like this. It's all tight and compact. Whereas with pushing, that isn't possible, but I think I've hit it pretty well in this. So I'm going to build up a few more modules, and then I'm going to look into the possibility of adding a weapon onto the front of this thing. I haven't entirely worked out what sort of weapon I want to put on the front of it, whether it's going to be something like a missile or it's going to be some kind of TNT cannon. And my heart is telling me missile. This is going to be something that gets fired out of the cannon, so it will be a flying machine that travels faster than the tank, and then when it hits something, it will explode massively. The only tricky factor is, how do I make it so that it doesn't fly without me telling it to fly? I don't know. How do I make a flying machine inside of a flying machine that doesn't fly until I activate something on the original flying machine? I don't know. Okay, I think I've had an idea, and that is to have a flying machine that is split in half like this, that gets pushed along, and then when I activate something, it will push the 2 pieces in line with one another, so it actually becomes a flying machine and can fly off. That makes sense to me. This observer here should be the one that activates it. There are so many ways this could potentially break. It is ridiculous. And it has already broken, and now it's broken again. And finally, now that I've got to pushing the machine, it broke itself anyway. But with this innovation here, I think fingers crossed it should work, because the observer will be pushed in front of the flying machine and then fire and then the flying machine moves on top of it, so it shouldn't push itself upwards as it's trying to move forwards. I finally have some confidence in this part of the mechanism. Oh my goodness. Yes, it is working. Everything is being pushed forwards, and then if I activate this... I just forgot how flying machines work. Thankfully, despite being embarrassing, that was very easy to fix, and now everything is fully functional. I know this sounds silly, but I'm so excited to activate this thing that my voice is like stuck in the back of my throat. I don't know how to describe it. I almost need to feel like I need to do some voice exercises. I'm just going to stop faffing around, and I'm going to activate this thing and watch it travel across the landscape. This is by far the coolest flying machine, if you could even call it that I've ever created. I mean, look at all there's all the tracks. The tracks making their way round. We've got the giant body. This is the first time that I've actually tried making like a solid looking flying machine. And then of course we've got the missile out front. I've got my target set up, so let's see if we can absolutely nail this thing. So it's moving forwards, but then all I have to do is activate this observer right here, and that will fire our missile. Which travels off. There's nothing cooler than watching a flying machine leave another flying machine. None of these things are particularly fast. Our tank is very slow, but all tanks are slow. Our missiles, it's as fast as we can go in Minecraft, but that doesn't mean it's quick. But there we go. It's hit the target. It looks like we've got ignition. I mean, that's pretty serious, isn't it? I'd say that's pretty good. And our tank is continuing forwards. I'm so happy. I'm so happy that this is built. I'm so happy it's working. I've spent so long building this thing, so I hope you enjoyed. And I'll catch you in the next video. See ya. Oh yeah, by the way, the mustache is still here.